Good news, bad news. If you think about it, past a certain point, drum lessons are a complete waste of money. You go there, you guys listen to play a couple of books, exercises by jamming in to a few CDs, and then he assigns you new exercises and CDs, and your mom pays him $20 for an hour. Then you repeat as necessary for a bunch of years. So I realized one day that hey, I had all the drum books and CDs I could ever need, and I could assign myself the next 2 pages of each book each week. All I had to do was bag my drum lessons, and I'd be saving the family $80 a month. Just like Miss Galley said, why don't you try working on things that you can change? But how do I do it? How do I tell this to my drum teacher after 5 years of together? This wasn't just any old drum teacher either. Miss Stoll had attended every single one of my school concerts since I'd started lessons. He had invited me to probably 10 of his gigs to watch him play, and had let me sit in on the drum set at a big band concert in front of 1,000 people. At the time, I'd been terrified, but later I figured out how amazingly cool it had been of him. So I couldn't just stop showing up. I needed a grand gesture to soften the blow, and it came with a beautiful one. The day of the last lesson came, I asked my mom to drop me off a few minutes early and let me pay Mr. Stoll, and then meet her outside at the end. I hadn't told the Rents anything about this plan, and I didn't want to take any chances of Mom and Miss Stroll talking that day. I shoved something into a stick bag before leaving the house and was about ready for action. So I went and exchanged pleasantries and even got through a few exercises before Mr. Stroll noticed I was sweaty and shaky. What's wrong, kid? Well, I have some bad news. What'd you get kicked out of all city or something? Worse. Is it about your brother? Not exactly. My family has a lot of expenses with the hospital thing, and my parents aren't worried about money, and I decided I can't have drum lessons anymore. I'm sorry, but we can't afford it. I can't pay you. I'm sorry. You said that already, kid. I did? I'm sorry. There you go again. Well, yeah, I brought you something. Just let me get it. I reached into the bag, pulled out Mr. Stoll's gift. I kept it behind my back for a moment, then said, "Look, you've been like a mentor to me, and you taught me a lot more than I could have ever imagined. And I wanted to give you something that to remember me by. So anyway, here it is." And I held out the special sticks out to him. You remember the ones that Carter Buford, the Dave Matthews Band, my drumming idol, signed for me? The ones that Jeffrey used to serve as dangerous pie? Kid, those are your prized possessions. Taking those would be like kicking you when you're down. Listen, how about this? Look, just for now, your lessons are free. Don't worry about it. It's my pleasure to help my best student out. Really? You really mean it? Yeah, I do. Now let's get back to work. We're on page 17 of Rudiment book, right? Yes, sir. One other thing. You might want to spray those things with Lysol or something. Is it me or do they smell like rotten eggs? At the end of the lesson, I realized I couldn't tell my mom that we made this deal with Mr. Stoll. So I ripped up the check that she had given me. I know in the long run is about as useful as duct taping over your car's fuel gauge so you won't run out of gas, but in the short run, delusion was the easier path than the truth. And come on, you have to admit the deception was all for a good cause. That week after school, we were supposed to be having rhythm section rehearsal for All City on Tuesday and Thursday. Our cohort was only a month away, and we needed the extra tightening up work. On Tuesday, Annette was absent, so I was the only one in our van on our way to high school. I was walking into the high school band room and started setting up the conga drums next to the drum set. Renee's boyfriend, Biff, was already plugging in his guitar, the bass player was tuning up, and the senior pianist was warming up on scales. After a usual round of "Hi Pez, hi Pez, hi Pez," everyone turned toward the band room door, which was slowly creaking open. Biff called out, "You can come in. It's okay. The peasant is fully housebroken. He's almost never bites anymore." An arm came through in the space between the door and the frame, an arm encased in a cast, Annette's arm. Then we heard her voice. "A little help here, anybody?" The bass player closest was closest, so he went trotting over and opened the door all the way. Annette came staggering in. She had been trying to carry a huge folder of sheet music in her crook of her injured arm. As Mr. Watrous saw what was going on, he walked over too, just in time to hear Annette's tale. "Here's my folder. I won't be playing in the spring concert. I fell down the stairs at my house last night and broke my arm in 3 places. They say it won't be better until at least May. I'm sorry." Mr. Watrous looked pretty perturbed by this news. Every teacher in the world had a soft spot for Annette. Plus, the girl's a musical dynamo. He was very kind about it, though. "It's okay, Annette. Why don't you come in and make yourself comfortable and stay for the rehearsal? You can be our critic. Would you dig that?" Yes, he was the last man in the world in America who could say dig with a straight face, without referring to some process of tool and removing dirt from the ground. She didn't look like this was the chance of her lifetime for anything, but she did smile a little then. I had a feeling she would have been crushed to be excluded completely, and this gave her a way to stick around and feel like she belonged. "Sure, thanks, Mr. W." We settled down for practice, and must have been hard for Annette, but she watched us play for the next 2 hours without a break. Occasionally, she'd whisper something to the senior piano player and Mr. Watrous, but other than that, all she did was listen and listen to the music, and she wouldn't be able to play. I, on the other hand, was on fire that day. When I was playing the set, all 4 limbs knew just what to do without me even having to think. In fact, the less I thought, the better I played. There was one part of this tune called "Satin Doll" where the band stopped dead and I had a gigantic fill that I typically screwed up at least once per rehearsal. I had tried everything, counting, having Mr. 1W conduct me through it, not counting, closing my eyes, reading the music, ignoring the music. Things just hadn't clicked. But that day, I didn't even blink an eye. Other instruments dropped out. The next thing I knew, I came back in. I hadn't even noticed I was playing solo break part, but I must have nailed it because Mr. W was smiling, and that gave me this little approving nod. It was like one of those Zen master moments in the movie when the master suddenly figures out the secret of the universe without trying. Well, okay, it was a little Zen master moment, but maybe when the master figures out the secret of Phillipsburg, New Jersey. It was still cool, though. I was so far in the zone that even Renee's arrive in a lyrical uniform couldn't throw me off. In fact, for the first time in my life, I didn't even particularly pay attention to Renee. I was just having too much fun playing. The last thing we practiced was the big show finale, Cuba B, Cuba Bob. I got ready behind the congas. Brian shifted to the drums round a bit so they were comfortable for him. He's about a foot taller than me. Mr. W and Annette came over. They were both going to do the chanting parts. They were usually handled by the saxophone section, and Mr. W was going to play the screaming trumpet parts too. This piece had been pretty rough practice so far, but for some days, you just click. We were super tight through the whole tune. Brian was playing this kit so well, I felt like we were telepathic. It was as if my magic right hand was his right foot. We were wired to the brain. The bass player was locked in there also, so everyone walking quarter note he played was pulsing exact time with Brian's left foot. Hi-hat clicks Meanwhile, Biff played an astounding solo. The notes just seemed to shimmer in the air like floating fire, and Mr. W was simply incredible. The piano player didn't know the part as well as Annette did, even though he usually played more than half of the show. This one was rightfully hers, but he rose to the occasion too. At the end, we all just stopped and looked around, these massive, dumb-looking grins on our faces. Then Renee started clapping, and Mr. W joined in. Maybe Annette would have clapped too if not for her cast and her for the painful look behind her smile. I wasn't so sure. On the way home in the van, Annette told me the whole arm story. Then she asked how Jeffrey was doing, which I thought was amazing. Here she was, with a limb all mangled and her piano crane slammed into reverse gear, worrying about my brother. I swear, sometimes I just really feel like pinning a medal on that girl. Anyway, I told her about the whole money situation and even about how I tried to quit drum lessons. She looked impressed that I'd been willing to sacrifice my lessons and thought it was hilarious that the special stick still spelled weird. Naturally, being in that, she did feel the need to warn me about how ripping up my mom's check wasn't going to work forever, but somehow in the preceding half year, I had figured out that the lectures were just Annette's thing. In fact, I would nearly have been disappointed if she hadn't given me a big fiery speech at that point. When we got to my house, we were a little sad goodbye, but I felt cheerful in a way. Evidently, you could shatter Annette's arm, but you couldn't break her spirit.